This is Paul Delaneve again. I'm going to introduce our next speaker, Dan O'Connor. Dan O'Connor is the team lead for Domino Designer. He works out of the Boston area. You can follow Dan on Twitter at Doconnor78.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks, Ed, for the introduction as well. So today I'm just going to go over the new features that we've added to Domino Designer for the 9.0 Social Edition beta. So I might as well just get straight into the slides, seeing as our time is limited today. So we'd several different design goals for the Social Edition. Obviously, we've had the upgrade pack, which many of you are probably familiar with. So really, we started working on the Social Edition back probably around the January timeframe, and since then, we've added several new features to Designer that'll make developers' lives much easier, we hope. So we've obviously integrated the extension library tooling that was shipped as a part of Upgrade Pack 1. We've integrated that into Designer Core such that we no longer require a separate install for the Designer tooling for Upgrade Pack 1. All of that has been moved into the core Designer, so that was a big piece of work. Also, we've improved the server-side JavaScript debugging experience, so I've got slides and a demo of this later, but we've received lots of feedback over time that users need a debugger for server-side JavaScript, and in the Social Edition we will actually be shipping a server-side JavaScript debugger. We've also, in line with what Ed was talking about with the Discover experience in the Notes client, we've created a new homepage in Designer whereby we've integrated a lot of the content that was previously in the welcome page and the homepage that was in Designer, and created a whole new homepage experience, which I have slides on later as well. We've improved XPages developer productivity by enhancing the XPages editor, particularly in source mode. We found out that a lot of developers are now going to source mode, and we've added many new improvements to that editor. And then to complement the Java design element that we shipped in 8.5.3, we now have a complementary jar design element that you can use in conjunction with your XPages development. So now you can import jars into your database quite easily using this new jar design element. And probably one of the lesser known features maybe of Upgrade Pack 1 was that there was actually an XSP properties editor shipped with that. And we've made this editor front and center in the Social Edition, so that now once you click, there's an XSP.properties item in the navigator, and once you select that, we get this new XSP.properties editor, which allows you to edit many of the properties that may previously have been unknown to you through this new XSP properties editor. And of course, we are continually focusing on quality, so we've made several quality improvements in high traffic areas such as the LotusScript editor. We've received feedback over time that there are areas such as the LotusScript editor where we have some serious bugs, and we have tried our best to fix as many of those as has been reported to us. So just talking about the upgrade pack for a while. So most on this call are probably familiar with the upgrade pack, but just in case you aren't, back in 2010 we released a project called the Extension Library to OpenNTF, and we got a lot of very positive feedback on that people wanted these controls and were using them quite frequently, and many customers asked that these be supported. So in the release model that we had previously, we felt that we couldn't get them out quick enough, so we introduced this new mechanism called an upgrade pack, and the first upgrade pack was released back in December of 2011, which seems like a long time ago now, but it was still less than a year ago. So we released the upgrade pack 1, and the intention is over time that these upgrade packs, as they're released between major and minor releases, that they will be rolled back into subsequent releases. So that is what has happened here. In the Social Edition, we've rolled back in Upgrade Pack 1. So actually you can really think of it as Upgrade Pack 1 Plus, because there are several fixes for non-critical issues but still bugs that have been reported against Upgrade Pack 1. Those fixes are also available in the Social Edition. So what this has meant for Domino Designer is that now we have over 100 additional new controls that show up in our palette between controls and data sources. And then we've also integrated all of the tooling that went with all of those controls. All of that tooling is now available in Domino Designer Social Edition. And also, as I spoke about earlier, the XSP Properties Editor, which was available in Upgrade Pack 1, that is now also been brought to the fore in this next release. So probably one of the more anticipated features is going to be the server-side JavaScript debugger. We've gotten lots of feedback over the years as XPage has been more widely adopted. Obviously, more and more developers are going to be developing on XPages, and once you start developing anything, if you're like me, you're going to start seeing bugs, and you're going to want to be able to get to the root of the cause of those bugs. And one of the ways of doing that is to debug your server-side JavaScript. So in the Social Edition, we have a new server-side JavaScript debugger. Basically what this debugger does is we piggyback on a well-known Java protocol, which is the debug protocol for Java. So we've basically built a layer on top of that protocol that allows us to debug our server-side JavaScript. The caveat here, I suppose, is that in order to do this, we also need a Social Edition server, so we can't debug against previous versions of Domino servers. We can only do it from the latest release and going forward. So how do we start debugging? So what we would do in a typical situation is there's a new toolbar item and there's a new menu item that allow us to create what's known as a debug configuration. So we have this new debug configuration for server-side JavaScript. So using your toolbar or your menu item, you'd create a new debug configuration, and in that you'd specify the server against which you want to debug. And in conjunction with that, on that particular server where the application resides, you need to add some ini properties. So there's 3 ini properties listed here at the bottom. 2 of them, Java Enable Debug and Java Debug Options, those were ini options that were available since, I believe, 8.5 or maybe 8.5.1 that allow you to debug Java code running on the server. And now for the Social Edition, we now have this JavaScript Enabled Debug ini option that allows us to debug server-side JavaScript. So once that's set up on your server, you are then able to connect from your Domino Designer client, able to connect to the server and proceed and debug. So basically you can set breakpoints within your server-side JavaScript code, just like you'd expect to set breakpoints in Java code or any other language. You can now set breakpoints right within the editors in the XSP or the XPages editor or the server-side JavaScript editor. You can just set breakpoints, and we've also added a new breakpoint keyword that allows you basically to persist breakpoints. So this breakpoint keyword will only be, execution of code will only stop at this particular keyword if the server is running in debug mode. So you could actually, in the design of your application, you could actually add the breakpoint keyword at key points such that if someone else needs to debug the application at a later point, all they need to do is just put the server into debug mode, and then execution will pause at wherever the keyword is added. But that's an option. It doesn't. You can actually just set breakpoints within your editor, and those aren't persisted. So this actual breakpoint keyword would actually be added to your code if you want to do that. But there are several ways of doing it, obviously. The one note here is that in order to do this, we are piggybacking on a Java protocol. So that protocol requires that a port, and that's what this address 8000 is at the bottom of the screen here, that a port be opened up for debugging. So we strongly advise against debugging production servers that have unprotected access to the internet, as basically you are opening up a port on that server. But this is basically in line with other Java web servers. The exact same protocol is in use here. So this is just a screenshot of our debugger. When designers in debug mode, we actually move to a new perspective called the debug perspective, and basically this screenshot is showing all of the various views that are now available to you. We have a debug view that shows our call stack. Then we have the editor here in the left center, and then on the right hand side we have our variables view that show all of the variables that are in the current context, and it shows the values for those variables, which of course is very important when debugging. Keeping on the debug theme, the XPages runtime, they've added options to allow us to more easily debug Dojo. So as you probably know, when you add Dojo to your XPage, all of the resources are downloaded in a compressed format, and this makes it very difficult for debugging because all of your JavaScript, all of your client-side JavaScript is highly compressed. So there's a new option, and it's been exposed through our XSP.properties editor. This allows you to use uncompressed resource files, so that when you enable this option, the next time when you hit an XPage on the server where this is enabled, or in the application where this is enabled, all of the Dojo CSS and JavaScript files will be downloaded in an uncompressed format, which makes it much easier to debug that source. And then the final slide I have here on debugging options is that also maybe not so well known, with the Upgrade Pack 1, we released all of the source for Upgrade Pack 1 with the installer. And the reason for this is, of course, that all of this is available also on OpenNTF. So what we did here is, in Upgrade Pack 1, all of the Java source for all of the plugins that are installed with Upgrade Pack 1, those are all installed. And this is the same for Social Edition. All of the source for the extension library plugins that are being installed is all going to be installed. So that makes it very easy actually to debug the Java code. And there's some setup here for those who will be looking at the slides later. There's some setup steps here basically in this slide that illustrate exactly how you would debug Java code. It's very simple. So you just need to download an extra plugin from OpenNTF, which is the Domino debug plugin, and then with some simple setup steps you import a project into your designer workspace, and in the space of a few minutes you can get debugging the Java code. So moving on to the welcome experience. So previously we had what was known as the welcome page, which was a page that showed up the very first time you launched Designer, and there was a checkbox on there that allowed you to say, in future instances, don't launch this page. And what we had found is, in a lot of cases, that is actually what was happening. People weren't reading the content. Maybe the content was a bit overwhelming, and people just wanted to get working and start doing their work. So in a lot of cases, we found they just dismissed the welcome page and didn't actually read much of the content, and there was some valuable content there. And then we had the home page, which was a little sparse on content. It just basically allowed you to create or open databases. So we felt the time was right in Social Edition to actually upgrade this. And there was a major effort being made on the Notes client side as well to create a new welcome page, a new Discover page as it's called. So we created a new home page, and this appears front and center, of course. When you launch Designer, you're going to get this new home page. It has lots of features in it. It shows all of your working sets that are created. It also allows you to complete common tasks such as creating or opening applications, also creating and editing working sets. And then there's lots of links and documentation throughout all of the different tabs that give you some great resources, some great online resources to read up further on X Pages and also on Domino Designer. And then there's a little tip also that appears each time you open up the page. There's a tip at the bottom of it. I think there's about 40 or 50 tips that are basically picked at random to be displayed each time the home page is launched. So just the slide is just basically going over some of what I've already talked about. Basically, it's an updated look and feel to align ourselves with the Discover page that is in the Notes client. We also have simplified this by removing the welcome page altogether so that users no longer have to dismiss that welcome page. We've updated the content with some introductory information and also some help links, so basically to bring you straight into the help system for different topics that we're discussing in the home page. And then we have this quick links tab that allow you to set which working set you want to use. It also shows all of your working sets as opposed to the previous experience that was in the navigator where you would just see your 5 most recent working sets. And then one of the other complaints we had about the previous homepage was that it was launched each time Designer was launched, regardless of whether or not you had shut it down in the previous session. So in the new homepage, if you close it, it remembers the next time when it's launching Designer and won't actually relaunch the page. So there's probably no reason why you would want to close this particular homepage. It's much more usable than the old one. Obviously, X Pages is a major focus for us, so we have made several productivity improvements for X Pages developers. We've added Content Assist to the X Pages source editor, so we've gotten a lot of feedback that a lot of developers are becoming quite savvy in X Pages, so they're going to source mode a lot of the time. They don't find the design experience to be adequate, so they're going to source mode. But one of the complaints, obviously, when they go to source mode is that they can't figure out which attributes are associated with particular tags. So now we have added Content Assist, so you can press Control Space in the context of your X page, and you'll get all of the attributes for the tag that you're in. We've also added hyperlink navigation. So this is those of you that are familiar with Eclipse, this is a fairly common feature in Eclipse, and that is that when you hover over a particular item in Eclipse, if you press the Control key, if hyperlink navigation is enabled, you actually can directly navigate to the particular resource that you're hovering over. So in the case of the X Pages editor, this means, for instance, if you had a link to a server-side JavaScript library or a client-side JavaScript library or CSS file or whatever, now you can press the Control key when hovering over that particular resource, and just by clicking on it, you actually get it opened directly in line. You don't have to go back to the navigator to find the item, and the same is true for custom controls. We've also updated our hover help so that when you hover over a particular tag in the source editor, a little pop-up will pop up giving a description of the tag, and if you're hovering over an attribute, you get a description of the tag and the attribute, and it's configurable such that you can set the length of time that it takes for the pop-up to appear, or if you just don't want to see the pop-up at all, you can actually disable it. We've also added palette state saving, and what this means is when you're switching from one X page editor to another, so you've got several X pages open at the same time and you want to switch from one to the other, the palette actually remembers its state. It doesn't, in the past what would happen is when you go from one X page to the other, the state of each X page would be remembered, but now in this case, if you have particular drawers opened in one X page, when you switch to the other X page, the state of the palette will be remembered, so those drawers will continue to be opened in the next X page. And the same is true when you restart Designer. We'll remember the state of the palette from the last time you opened it, from the last time you closed Designer. Of course, we have the new jar design element, which complements the Java design element. So now you can have jars. You can use jars quite easily with your X pages. And then the navigator also shows all working sets. So in 8.5.3 in previous releases, we only showed the 5 most recent working sets. You actually had to go to the Manage Working Sets dialog to see beyond that. So we've added a new menu item to the navigator that now shows you all of the working sets. Of course, we are very conscious of quality. We've several critical bug fixes in the social edition. There was an error 500 that was reported early on in 8.5.3, after 8.5.3 released, that was related to the Java design element. That's been fixed in 8.5.3 Fix Pack 1. There were some source control issues also reported in 8.5.3. Obviously, 8.5.3 was the first release that we had source control, so as users started to add more complex uses of source control, we found some bugs there, and those most critical issues have been fixed in 8.5.3 Fix Pack 2. And of course, as I said earlier, we have lots of fixes in the tooling that went out with Upgrade Pack 1. Another issue that has been reported to me lately, and thankfully is actually fixed in the social edition, is that we had a memory leak in the XPages editor where the XPages editor was not releasing all of the memory associated with it when the editor was closed. So this is actually fixed in the social edition. So those of you that are seeing poor performance in the XPages editor once you've opened several XPages, this should be fixed now in the beta. So if you grab the beta, hopefully your experience will be much improved. And also, LotusScript, the LotusScript editor continues to be a priority for us. We understand that a lot of users are still using LotusScript in their day-to-day work. So as a part of this effort, we've actually fixed several issues that have been reported to us in the LotusScript editor. One of the more commonly reported ones and widely reported ones was that the problems view in previous releases did not report the correct line number. So the problems view would report one line number for a particular problem. And when you open up your LotusScript editor, you would find that the problem was actually at a different line number. It wasn't an easy fix, but we actually fixed that issue. And we've also added a preference to when paste occurs that all of your code will not be reformatted. We've added a preference to disable that particular feature. So I think that brings me on to my demo. So I'll quickly demo these features. So I'm going to switch over here to Designer. So I'm just going to minimize a few things here. So when Designer first comes up, this is what you will be presented with. This is our new homepage experience. So you can see we have multiple tabs here. The Quick Links tab basically provides you links to items that you would probably do in your day-to-day work. So we show all of our working sets here. We're showing all of these common tasks, such as creating new applications, opening existing ones, creating working sets. And then we have some probably high-priority resources, I guess, that we want to show front and center, such as OpenNTF and DeveloperWorks. And then we have our tip down here that I was talking about. So if this came up by default, you wouldn't actually, the first time you launch Designer, if you have no working sets, then this area is going to contain some other information explaining how to create working sets. But the home page dynamically knows when you change working sets or when you add new working sets, and those are automatically added to this list. So I can actually go along here and select different working sets right from within the home page. So I'm just going to go back to my TLCC demo working set, and then of course we have a new item here that has been asked for a long time as well from those that use working sets, and that is to actually show the applications that aren't in a working set. So I can click on that and I can see all of my applications that are not in a working set. And if there were no applications in no working sets, then this item would not appear. And we have a corresponding item here in our menu that shows applications not in a working set also. So I'm going to go back to my TLCC working set. So then I have various tabs showing all various types of information relating to XPages, Designer. We have these beyond the basics, so it's a very similar look and feel to each tab. So we have our XPages basics and working with XPages using XPages controls, and then this also provides links out to all various help topics. Some of the help topics are within our help system, more of the topics are actually out on the internet. So the same is true here. We've a what's new, so we've described what's new in this release. And then the same with Learn More. It's just basically a tab that provides links to resources out on the internet that community resources and whatnot, and application wikis, application development wikis. So that's the home page. And of course you'll see back here I have more than 5 working sets, or 6 here, so it's showing all of the working sets that I have. So just to go through some of the XPages features quickly before we get on to the debugger. So I have this test X page here. So the typical experience here in the past would have been, a user, you've probably all experienced it yourselves as application developers. You open up an X page, you're presented with this design experience, and you switch to the source tab, and then you find out that actually this is very sparse. I don't really see what's going on here. So in the past, what you'd have to do is go look for that. You can see there's a custom control, and it's actually the custom control that's giving all of the design experience. So now I can actually hover over this custom control. We can see there's no description provided for this custom control in our pop-up help, but also if I'm just now pressing the control key and I see that this custom control is appearing as a link, and the same is going to be true for all of these resources up here. So I have some client-side JavaScript, some server-side JavaScript, I have a resource bundle and a CSS file. So if I'm hovering over, so I'm going to pick the resource bundle for instance, and if I press the mouse key while hovering over it with the control key pressed, the string.properties file gets open, and the same is true for all of these other resources. And the nice thing with this is it's actually been implemented with an extension point, such that if other vendors decide in the future that they're contributing XPages runtime controls, they can also take advantage of this capability within the XPages source editor. So I'm going to click into the custom control. So that opens up my custom control right in line for me without having to go to the navigator. And now I can see this keep session alive tag, and I'm not quite familiar with that. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to press Control Space, and I'm actually going to be presented with all of the attributes that are associated with this tag. And if I click on any of the attributes, I also get a description of the particular attribute, and that's the same as the description I would get when I hover over the attribute when it would be on the X page. So I'm going to pick this delay attribute, and now I can start typing some JavaScript. And we can see it actually popped up there for me when I press Control Space again within here. Now I'm going to get content assist for my JavaScript, which is very useful also. So you don't actually have to bring up the dialog anymore, the JavaScript dialog. So now I can just pick items right within the context of my X page in source mode, and now I can see all of the JavaScript, all of the content assist for this. So just going to delete this attribute. So the hover help also supports this dot notation. So in the case of using complex attributes on your X page, we use this dot, and in this case this dot search bar. So search bar is an attribute, and when I hover over it, we can see that the pop-up help gives me the description of the search bar attribute, and it just tells me exactly what that is for. So I can do that for any attribute there that's on my X page. So if I'm not quite sure what a particular attribute, what it's doing for my XPages application, I can just hover over it and I get help. So you can see in the case of the navigation path here, I get quite a bit of help telling me exactly how to use this particular attribute. So of course here in our navigator, just moving along, we also have all of our working sets displayed in the navigator. The XSP, we've a new item in the navigator as well. We now have this application configuration item, which is showing up in my navigator. And then within that, we have our application properties, which has always been available. And now we have this new XSP.properties editor. So I can open that up. And this presents all of the XSP properties. So some of these previously were in application properties. We've removed them from application properties and put them in one common place. So all of these properties are just related to your XPages runtime for this particular application. So we have various tabs. We can see here we have some of this content was previously also in the applications or the applications properties editor, like I said. And then we also have this source mode. So again, third parties contributing extensions to XPages, to the XPages runtime. Sometimes they can add XSP properties that they will use at runtime. So now you can actually just edit this source file right from within this XSP properties editor. And those properties will then be picked up by the runtime. You don't have to wait for the tooling to be provided through these pretty panels, as they're called. You can just actually edit the source directly. So that's a great improvement also. So for those of you that are hardcore XPages developers, we now have a new preference here to actually show Faces config right within the navigator. So if you want to edit Faces config, if you're adding managed beans to your application, for instance, you can edit Faces config right here from within the navigator. And then we also have some further preferences dealing with the load script editor. So now we can automatically indent pasted code. We can turn this off or on depending on our preference. So probably the feature that you're most waiting for is the debugger. So I'm just going to quickly here move along. So now we have the toolbar is actually disabled in this particular build that I have, but it'll be re-enabled before beta. But I have this new menu item, and I have a corresponding toolbar item which allows me to debug server-side JavaScript. The first thing I'm going to do is just say manage debug configurations, and that's going to bring up this new debug configuration. And this dialog actually tells me what I need to enable. So my server in this case already has these options enabled, and all of this is set up. But I'm just going to change this port number just to show if it wasn't set up properly. This is the error message you would get. So I hit the debug button, and now it's going to tell me that I need to modify the server that I'm trying to connect to. And these items are selectable, so I can copy and paste these any variables from directly within the dialog. So I'm going to hit OK. It's going to bring this back up. Change this to 8,000. Now I'm going to hit debug, and now I've started debugging. I didn't get any error dialog. We are working on some UI for the beta that will make it more clear that you've started debugging, but I know because I didn't get a dialog that a debug session has been created for me. So I'm going to go to my browser. I have some breakpoints set in my code, so I'm just going to hit my profile. And now the breakpoint has been hit, and I'm going to be asked, do I want to switch to the debug perspective? I do. So now I'm going to change to the debug perspective. I can see my variables here. All of my variables, some of these are coming from Java code, some of these are coming from server-side JavaScript, but all of these variables are being shown, and the values of the variables are also being shown. So I can step over, as you would expect, just like with a debugger. So I have my debug view here, and it's showing the stack trace from where the code path is that led to this particular point in time. So that's my debugger, and I'm just going to hit continue here. I'm going to hit continue a few times. So I can disable my breakpoints. I can also enable them based on a computed value, so I can actually compute whether or not I want the breakpoint to be hit during execution. So I'm going to go back to my web page here, and I'm actually going to go to my contacts. So this is pulling my contacts down from Notice Live. And in this case, I can see that this guy, Robert Lawless, doesn't have a picture associated with him. So what I'm going to do is just debug to see why is that. So I'm going to go back here to my code. So I've set a breakpoint in the script library that does the parsing to figure out these users and their photos. So I'm just going to refresh this X page. And now the breakpoint gets hit. Or it should have got hit. Let me refresh that again. Typical, the demo demons have struck. But what I was actually going to demo here is that had my breakpoint been hit, for some reason I'm using obviously a pre-beta build here. It's just my daily build. We can actually edit variables inline, so we could actually edit the values right here within the variables view. But obviously I can't do that for some reason now. I might have actually set the breakpoint in the wrong method. I'm not sure here. Actually, here, I'll set a breakpoint here. I think this might be it. We'll try this one more time, and if not, I'll just hand it off to Martin. Okay, so No, it has not stopped execution for some reason. Okay, so with that, I'll hand it back to Paul to introduce Martin.